We have a major Bucks trade update to go over today, as it is no secret that fans have been fed up with Pat Connaughton's play this past season, and as a result, rumors are starting to circulate surrounding a trade between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Charlotte Hornets. We're going to go over that trade and discuss what it can mean going forward for the Bucks. So stay tuned for all that in this episode, but before we do, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you're a part of the 86 or so percent that aren't subscribed to the channel, we're very, very close to 1,000 subscribers, and it would mean the world to myself if you could hit that button if you enjoy daily Bucks content. But let's dive into some things today. Now, obviously, the Milwaukee Bucks, like I've said in previous videos, had a very disappointing season last year, and they've made a bunch of changes to their roster. And obviously, we're hoping for a Damian Lillard bounce back season and really his first breakout year with the Bucks and Giannis Antetokounmpo. But a recent article was posted surrounding Pat Connaughton, and this is a guy that has a lot of Bucks fans, especially as the season and the playoffs and they got eliminated came to a close, had a lot of Bucks fans up in arms. And I'll show you some outrage from the Bucks fans. And I want to start with the trade. So mock trade. Hornets swap veteran swingman in deal with the Milwaukee Bucks. So this is a trade between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Charlotte Hornets. And of course, it's going to be very interesting. I want to get all your thoughts in the comment section. But basically, the article goes on to say that from the Hornets' point of view, they're 3 weeks away from opening their preseason campaign. Obviously, the season is starting soon. You can see in the second paragraph, Dan Favel of Bleacher Report suggests that the Hornets should do just that. He suggests that the Hornets should get on the horn with Milwaukee, also known as the phone, and swap Cody Martin for Pat Connaughton and Milwaukee's 2031 second-round pick. He makes intriguing points on how this deal would benefit both sides, and we'll get into his explanation for it in a minute. But before we do, I want to get into my thoughts about this. So obviously, you're swapping Cody Martin for Connaughton, and you're also giving up, if you're Milwaukee, a second-round pick in 2031. So very, very far away here. And when you get into some of their stats, and they're very similar players, but I think a lot of Bucks fans would agree that at this point, it might be time to move on from Connaughton and to swap it for someone else who can provide some more depth on the team. And that's not being, obviously, Pat's been a very good player for the Bucks for a while now, but Cody Martin is a very interesting one. So if you look into their stats here, there's some interesting things to discuss. So we know that Pat's almost 32 years old. He's 6'5", but thing with him is last season he had a very rough year, only putting up 5 points and 3 rebounds per game. Still a very decent three-point shooter, averaging about 34.5%, so above league average, and he's a solid three-point shooter. But the problem is that he's kind of fallen off, especially last year. His defense has taken a bit of a hit as well, only putting up, again, 5 points a game, no steals, really, no blocks. Now, the question mark is, and a lot of fans out there, and I'll bring up an example here. We all know the Pat Connaughton experiments. I'm kind of on the fence of just changing things up. And after last season, when the Bucks were supposed to be among the Celtics and a couple other teams, one of the favorites to win the NBA championship, he was a lot of fans' favorites to win the championship, and analysts alike, because they obviously got Damian Lillard, and adding Lillard to Giannis was supposed to be a huge upgrade, which it ultimately ended up being an upgrade, but not a big enough one to take down really anybody in the East. But that being said, a lot of fans were kind of fed up with the end of the season, and a lot of that blame was actually put on not necessarily only Pat Connaughton, but just the front office in general here. And you obviously look at their depth chart. We'll get into that in a minute, but I saw this, and this was from 5 months ago as the season ended, and it was a very interesting thread. As Connaughton has to go, only averaged, and to put things in perspective, 3.7 points per game in the playoffs, shooting 25% from 3. And one of the things that stung here is that he brings up the fact that obviously former Bucks Grayson Allen and Dante DiVincenzo were crushing it in the playoffs on their respective teams. Our front office messed up this one. Injuries, of course, all these things. And we know the injuries to Giannis, the injuries specifically to Damian Lillard, is what ultimately cost the Bucks the playoff run. And obviously the injury to Giannis was the biggest reason, him missing a couple playoff games there. But you can't really ignore, that being said, all the other things that happened. And Pat Connaughton, I mentioned his stats here, 5 points a game. This is regular season stats. In the playoffs, like I just mentioned, he was absolutely disastrous. And this was at a time where you needed someone like him to step up. Someone who's been in the league for a little bit. He's approaching 32 years old. He's a 3D wing. You needed him to step up in the absence of Giannis and in the absence of other guys. It was really next man up for the Bucks. And ultimately, Pat wasn't able to do that. It's not solely on him. It's obviously on a lot of the other players as well. But they needed more from him, and fans were not very happy with his performance. And as a result, some trade rumors are starting to escalate. Now, when you're looking at Cody Martin, he's an interesting guy. So he obviously plays for the Hornets. Cody is essentially, he's the same height. He's a younger version of Connaughton to a degree. He's more of an on-ball creator than Pat is. You can see this here. He averaged 7.5 points per game, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. A bit more of a complete player, whereas Pat is kind of a pure 3-and-D guy. His brother Caleb. Cody is a bit more of an on-ball creator. You can see he averages a lot more assists than Pat. He penetrates more. He's a better finisher than Connaughton. However, his three-point shooting is significantly worse, especially last year. He had a really rough year when it comes to efficiency. Granted, he was on the Charlotte Hornets, and they don't have too many creators on that team other than LaMelo Ball and some of the other guys, Miles Bridges. But his field goal percentage shooting 38% from the field, 31% from three. He was shooting, which is interesting, about 35% on corner threes. And if you get him into the Bucks system where they have Damian Lillard, they have Giannis, they have all of these guys, Chris Middleton, a lot of guys who can create, he will get a lot more open looks. And from the corner, he's above average shooter from three-point range. He could really fit into this team well, and he provides a bit of a different dynamic compared to a Connaughton, more of a complete player, even though he's a bit less efficient at this point. He's a bit more of an on-ball guy. So I'm curious to see what you all think about this. And here's what the writer of this trade, the analyst, gives for reasonings for both sides. He obviously had various knee and ankle injuries have limited him to just 35 games over the past 2 seasons. When healthy, though, he's a very good on-ball defender. Charlotte has routinely deployed him against 1s, 2s, 3s, and even 4s. This is obviously talking about Martin. At his peak in 2021, 2022, Martin has showed he can knock down spot-up threes and torch defenses as a connective passer and tertiary playmaker. So he's obviously been battling injuries, so it might be a good time for the Milwaukee Bucks to buy low on him. And again, a very solid defender when he's healthy. In 2021, his best season, he was an above average or way better shooter than he was last year. And like I mentioned, he's much more of a playmaker, much more of a creator himself. So if he can add another aspect and be able to create and help Chris Middleton, help Damian Lillard, help Giannis, could make a ton of sense. You can see here, he says Milwaukee shouldn't need to think twice here, injury concerns and all. His salary is non-guaranteed, so worst case, it can shave serious money off next year's tax bill. And again, if you're the Hornets, you're getting a second-round pick for a guy in Martin who you're probably not factoring into your future. You obviously have LaMelo Ball, you have your new draft picks, Brandon Miller. So you're able to get a second-round pick out of Martin. You're also getting Connaughton who could help as a veteran guy. Maybe just help the Hornets be a little bit more competitive. Help LaMelo Ball by spotting up, being a 3-and-D guy. So it makes sense for both sides here. And as you look into the Milwaukee Bucks depth chart, he could really fit. Now, whether it's in the second unit, whether it's in this projected case, the third unit where Pat Connaughton could be, Martin has a lot more upside. He's younger, and if he can stay healthy, could really provide a lot more to that third unit, and especially off the bench, even helping out that second unit. They obviously have Gary Trent Jr. You have DeLon Wright now, and DeLon Wright can do a lot of the things that Martin does, but adding another guy is never going to hurt, especially when you're going for a championship. And that's why ultimately I think it makes sense for both sides here. I love it if you're a Milwaukee Bucks fan. He's above average in the corner from corner threes. The thing is, though, he does average a bit more turnovers. And that's the big difference here. At 1.6 turnovers a game compared to 0.6, because Connaughton doesn't create as much for himself. He doesn't facilitate as much. That being said, the Bucks have a ton of guys who can do that anyway. So it's going to be interesting to see what they decide to do and if this trade comes to fruition, because I like it for both sides. And specifically, if you're a Bucks fan, I think it makes a lot of sense, especially given the fact that Connaughton was very, very bad in the playoffs. And they ultimately need more playoff performers. And that's what they got in Damian Lillard and hopefully some of their new additions like Taurean Prince, DeLon Wright, and all of those guys, and Gary Trent Jr. But let me know in the comments your thoughts are on this trade. Would you do this trade if you are the Milwaukee Bucks, or would you pass him Connaughton one more year? Let me know.